Welcome to HFY Genesis. Today's story explores how humanity faced impossible odds and made an unthinkable choice in the face of overwhelming alien power. What happens when humanity refuses to bow down to the Galactic Council? Let's dive into Humans Walk Away from Peace Talks, Throwing Galactic Council into Chaos. The galaxy had lived in a state of precarious balance for centuries. The Galactic Council, a collective of powerful alien species, ruled with an iron grip, enforcing peace under the banner of order. Every race knew their place. Every system obeyed the dictates of the Council. And humans, still a fledgling species in the grand cosmic theater, had long been relegated to the sidelines. Earth, once a backwater planet, had become a crucial asset to the Council's far-reaching empire. Their resources were limitless, their potential underestimated. For years, humanity had worked within the confines of a system that constantly reminded them of their lesser status. They were granted protection, but also supervision. A supervised world, with overseers from the Council quietly ensuring the humans remained subjugated. Yet today, something was different. Inside the opulent Council Assembly Hall, a vast hollow dome that reflected the grandeur of the ruling species, the peace talks had reached a critical juncture. Leaders from the Council's most powerful species sat at the long circular table, each one representing a different facet of galactic authority. The Shilvani, cold and calculating, the Xyla, ancient and wise, and the Andorians, proud and militaristic, all observed as Evelyn Cade, humanity's chief negotiator, prepared to address the assembly. Evelyn had spent months preparing for this moment. She had been chosen to represent Earth, not because of her diplomatic prowess, but because she embodied everything humanity had come to represent. Resilience, an unwillingness to bow to the will of others, and a spark of defiance that had been growing for decades. The Council knew this was a pivotal moment. Earth's place in the galaxy could either be solidified as a compliant partner or shattered forever, as a rebellious force that could not be controlled. The stakes had never been higher. Evelyn's heart raced in the silence of the room, a stark contrast to the shimmering projection of the galaxy that illuminated the dome above. For a moment, she considered the weight of her decision. The peace talks had been billed as humanity's opportunity to join the galactic community, but the price had been too high. The terms the Council offered would leave humanity shackled in a gilded cage, kept in check with technology and resources, all manipulated by the Council to ensure Earth would never rise above its station. Humanity's future is at stake, Evelyn thought, glancing down at the terms on the screen in front of her. Are we to remain their puppets, or will we show them our strength? She took a deep breath. The time had come. I refuse, Evelyn said, standing slowly, her voice carrying across the grand chamber. I refuse to sign this agreement. A ripple of shock swept through the room. The Xyla's ancient eyes narrowed, their crystalline features betraying nothing, but the weight of their scrutiny was palpable. What do you mean, refuse? The words were spoken slowly, with the quiet menace of an ancient species that had always had its way. We will not be controlled. Not by you, not by anyone, Evelyn continued, her voice steady. The silence in the room thickened as her declaration echoed. The Council's representatives exchanged tense glances, their faces betraying a mix of disbelief, anger, and the first stirrings of panic. The Shilvani leader, a sleek, pale alien whose voice was as cold as the void, spoke next. Do you truly believe that humanity's continued existence will be tolerated should you walk away? You are nothing more than a fragile species, barely beyond the threshold of galactic adolescence. Evelyn didn't flinch. We will stand on our own, or not at all, but we will not accept a life in servitude. The room erupted into chaos. The Andorians, who had long favored control over peace, gripped their weapons beneath their cloaks. The Xyla debated, their ethereal minds calculating the implications of this rebellion, while the Shilvani debated whether to immediately neutralize the threat before them. Councillor Relith, a diplomat from the Xylar delegation, rose, her tone cutting through the chaos like a blade. "You are playing a dangerous game, Evelyn Cade. The Council does not take kindly to insubordination, especially from such a young species." Evelyn's eyes flickered to the projection of Earth's image that hung in the center of the chamber. Her home, a vibrant world, still thriving despite the odds. "Maybe it's time we show the galaxy that humanity isn't as weak as you think." The tension in the room was palpable. Evelyn had done what many had considered impossible. She had rejected the Council's terms, severing the fragile thread that had held Earth under their control for so long. But her actions were not without consequences. Outside the Council Hall, the news spread like wildfire across the galaxy. The communication channels exploded with messages of shock and outrage. Humanity had refused to bow. The news reached the farthest colonies, causing unrest among species who had long been subjugated by the Council's iron grip. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy felt the tremors of a new, unpredictable force, a force that would refuse to be silenced. What would you do if faced with impossible odds? Would you take the risk and defy the powerful forces trying to control your fate? Let us know in the comments below. Call to action. Enjoying this chapter? Don't forget to like and subscribe to HFY Genesis for more epic tales of rebellion, courage, and humanity's fight for freedom. The galaxy had never known such uncertainty. A single act of defiance had unraveled the delicate web of control the Galactic Council had spun across countless star systems. Humanity's refusal to submit to their terms sent ripples through the core of the galaxy. Ripples that threatened to turn into waves of chaos. But for Evelyn Cade, the diplomatic breakthrough was only the beginning of a far more perilous journey. It was one thing to walk away from the peace talks, but the true test lay ahead. Could humanity truly stand on its own, or would it be crushed under the weight of galactic powers much older and more formidable? The first steps toward freedom. Evelyn sat in the command room aboard the Vanguard, the flagship of humanity's nascent fleet. The bridge was filled with a quiet, focused tension, the hum of the ship's systems in stark contrast to the growing chaos outside. After the dramatic exit from the peace talks, the Vanguard and its ragtag fleet of resistance ships were forced into hyperspace, fleeing toward the outer colonies. "We've made our first move," said Captain Adrian Voss, his voice rough with weariness, his eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. His tone was as steely as the determination etched across his face. "Now we're heading to the rim. The Council will be after us. They'll want to extinguish this rebellion before it gains any momentum." Evelyn nodded, though she didn't feel the confidence in her bones that she wanted to project. The stakes had just been raised to a level she could never have anticipated. If the Vanguard didn't find support soon, humanity would be fighting a war on its own. Their chances were slim. Every galaxy-shaking decision they made would be met with immediate retaliation from an enemy that had dominated the cosmos for centuries. "We need more than just escape routes," Evelyn said, eyes fixed on the navigation chart. "We need allies. We need resources. We need to make sure that we're not just running." Voss looked at her, and for the first time since the peace talks had fallen apart, he smiled. "I've been listening to the right people," he said, "and there are more of us out there than you think. New alliances, old wounds." The first planet they arrived at was a barren rock, its surface scarred by years of war and resource exploitation. Verdus III was one of the outer colonies where the Council had long oppressed its inhabitants, and yet it was the perfect place to find those willing to fight back. The people here, mostly human settlers and disenfranchised alien races, had learned to survive in the shadows, away from the Council's watchful eyes. Their cities were underground, hidden from the prying eyes of Council surveillance drones. The alliance they sought wouldn't come easily. The bitter taste of betrayal ran deep for many of the rebel factions. Evelyn, Voss, and their small diplomatic team made their way to the underground base of the Verdis resistance, led by Seren Kale, a former council officer who had defected after witnessing the council's atrocities on her homeworld. The cold steel walls of the resistance's base were lined with weapons and technology scavenged from countless skirmishes. But despite their power, the Verdis forces were wary of outsiders. Seren was a sharp woman with a hardened face, her once pristine uniform now tattered from years of guerrilla warfare. When she first laid eyes on Evelyn and her team, her gaze was filled with skepticism. "You're asking me to trust you after what the council did to my people?" Serene's voice was laced with bitterness. "You walked away from the talks. You don't think they'll come after you? After us?" "We don't have a choice," Evelyn said, her voice unwavering. "And if we don't join forces, the council will wipe out all of us, one by one." Seren studied her for a moment, then exhaled slowly, her shoulders sagging as if the weight of their situation had crushed her once more. "We're running out of time. If you want to unite the rebels, you'll have to do more than just talk. You'll need to show them that this isn't just a political move. It's a fight for survival." For weeks, they fought together, human and alien forces, rebels and defectors, building the alliance they desperately needed. But with every victory, the cracks in the coalition grew. Disagreements over strategy and resources festered. Some of the alien races had never trusted humanity. To them, humans were simply another species to be manipulated for the Council's goals. As they made their way to a larger system, a hub for trade and smuggling, Evelyn found herself sitting alone on the bridge of the Vanguard, the weight of the rebellion pressing heavily on her shoulders. She couldn't deny the growing unease in her heart. How could she keep this fragile coalition together? How could they possibly take on the entire might of the Galactic Council? A sudden chirp interrupted her thoughts. Voss's voice crackled over the comm. "Evelyn, you're going to want to see this. We've got a signal from the Xylar, the race with the longest-standing council allegiance." Evelyn's stomach tightened. "What do they want?" Voss's tone softened, a rare hint of hope flickering. "They say they want to join us." The Xylar's decision to join the rebellion came with conditions. They wanted Earth's most advanced military technology in exchange for their support, and their terms were steep. But Evelyn understood something crucial. Sometimes you had to make painful choices to secure a greater good. The negotiations were tense. Voss, Serene, and the other leaders sat at the table, pushing for a compromise, while Evelyn tried to hold their fragile alliance together. Every word, every offer felt like a delicate negotiation between life and death. As the days turned into weeks, they were joined by other factions, former council allies, smugglers, refugees from devastated worlds, all seeking to break free from the oppressive rule. Each new ally brought hope, but also uncertainty. Could they hold it together long enough to take on the council? Tensions rise. With the Xylar now on their side, the coalition's strength grew, but so did the pressure. Council spies were everywhere, and the rebel fleet had become a target. In a tense moment on the Vanguard's bridge, Evelyn turned to Voss, her voice quieter than usual. "We've won some battles," she said, looking out into the stars. "But every victory brings us closer to a war we might not win." Voss stood next to her, his hand resting on the control panel. "I know," he replied. "But if we don't fight, we die slowly. And I don't know about you, but I'm not ready to let them win." Evelyn nodded, but the doubt lingered in her mind. Was the price of freedom worth the cost? Could they truly succeed against a galaxy-spanning empire? If you were in Evelyn's position, would you risk everything to form an unlikely alliance, even knowing that every step forward could lead to the fall of the rebellion? What would you do? Enjoying this chapter? Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to HFY Genesis for more epic tales of defiance, courage, and humanity's fight for freedom. The galaxy was burning, and humanity was at the heart of the fire. The Vanguard, once a symbol of hope, now felt like a drifting tomb, a fragile vessel struggling to keep its crew together in the midst of overwhelming odds. After their defiant rejection of the Council's terms, the rebellion was officially underway, but the path forward was filled with peril. Evelyn Cade sat in her quarters, staring at the map of the galaxy projected on the screen in front of her. Pinpoints of light marked the planets they'd liberated, the cities they'd taken back from the Council's iron grip. But for every victory, there were 10 more challenges ahead. The Council was not a singular enemy. It was an empire of billions of sentient beings, each species with its own agenda, each one with its own interests. Her fingers brushed over the holoscreen, tracing the route toward their next objective, the Xylar cluster, a critical hub of resources controlled by the Council. They had to take it if they were to gain the upper hand. But trust among the newly formed coalition of rebel species was beginning to fray. The unity that had held them together in their first rush of rebellion was already starting to crumble. The shattered alliance, Seren Kale, the former council officer turned rebel leader, had become one of the most valuable members of the coalition. But now, her once strong resolve was cracking. The Xylars, despite their earlier promise of allegiance, were beginning to doubt the humanity-led rebellion. They questioned whether the humans could truly lead the galaxy to freedom, or whether they were too impulsive and inexperienced to ever bring lasting peace. "You don't understand, Evelyn," Seren said, her voice tight with frustration as she stood in front of the briefing table in the Vanguard's war room. "The Xylars have a different way of doing things. We can't keep asking for their trust without showing them something solid, a victory, a real victory, not just ambushes in the middle of nowhere." Evelyn clenched her fists, struggling to hold her temper. "And what do you think we've been doing, Seren?" "We've been risking everything for this cause." The Xylars agreed to join us. If they're going to back out now, we might as well hand the entire galaxy back to the Council. Serene's sharp eyes met Evelyn's. "I never said we hand anything over, but you need to understand. We can't keep running from one place to the next, hoping for scraps of support. If we're to win this, we need more than just hope. We need loyalty." Loyalty. It was the word that had haunted Evelyn ever since the peace talks had ended. The alliances they had formed, fragile as they were, now seemed like they could shatter with one wrong move. The betrayal. The rebellion's fragile unity snapped like a brittle twig when the Xylars, the very species that had pledged their support, suddenly disappeared from their position in the coalition. The Vanguard received word from a trusted source that the Xylars had been in talks with the Council, and their emissaries were already on board a Council warship, negotiating the terms of their betrayal. Evelyn had seen betrayal before in her years as a diplomat, but nothing prepared her for the cold realization that the Xylars had played them all along. They had seen the opportunity to gain more for themselves, and now they were willing to sell out the human rebellion for a place back under the Council's rule. "We have to stop them," Voss said, slamming his fist on the table, "before they hand over everything we've fought for." But Evelyn felt something darker growing inside her. Her initial anger at the Xylars slowly turned into cold, calculating resolve. "No," she said, her voice chilling in its calmness. "We'll let them think they've won for now. Let them walk back into the Council's embrace." Voss looked confused. "You want to let them go?" Evelyn's expression hardened. "We need to prove something, Voss. Something bigger than just taking back resources or defeating an enemy. We need to show the galaxy that no one, not even the Xylars, can betray us without facing the consequences." The path forward. The Xylars' betrayal became the catalyst for an even greater plan. Evelyn, guided by the lessons she had learned through years of negotiation, understood that true victory in this war wouldn't come from striking harder or faster. It would come from making the galaxy realize that the human rebellion was unstoppable, that it was a force of unity too powerful to break, even by those who had once stood beside them. The rebellion had always been about more than just a fight for independence. It had been about proving to the galaxy that humanity would not bow to those who sought to control them. "I have a plan," Evelyn said to her inner circle as she laid out the next phase of their operation. "We hit their capital, where the Council's heart beats the strongest. We don't just fight. We send a message. We send a message to every species that's ever been suppressed by them." A silent murmur spread through the room as they processed her words. Seren, still seething from her disappointment in the Xylers, looked at Evelyn with renewed determination. "You're right. The time to sit idly by is over." "Let's do it," Voss added with a grin, his sharp eyes sparkling with renewed focus. The test of unity. As they prepared to make their bold move, the Vanguard's crew grew more united than ever. For the first time, Evelyn could see the resolve in their eyes. Humans, Xylers, and others, side by side, no longer fighting for survival, but for a future where they would not be ruled by the will of the Council. But Evelyn also knew that even the most unified rebellion would face moments of doubt. Her heart still held a seed of uncertainty. Was this rebellion truly ready to lead the galaxy? And if they succeeded, what kind of galaxy would they leave behind? These questions echoed in her mind as the Vanguard and its fleet of allied ships slipped into enemy territory, ready to strike at the very heart of the Council's power. What would you do if you found yourself betrayed by an ally you once trusted? Would you fight for them, or would you make sure they face the consequences of their actions? Enjoying this chapter? Don't forget to like and subscribe to HFY Genesis for more thrilling tales of rebellion, unity, and humanity's fight for freedom. The stars were no longer just a distant, silent witness to humanity's fight for freedom. They were now the stage for their revolution. The rebellion, once a collection of disparate cells of resistance, had become a force to be reckoned with, fueled by the shockwaves of humanity's bold move against the Galactic Council. And now, Evelyn Cade found herself at the center of a much larger battle, one that would decide the fate of the galaxy. The Coalition strains. The Vanguard glided through space, its hull battered from skirmishes with Council forces, but its crew unbowed. The fleet of ships that followed, comprised of humans, Shilvani, Xylers, and Andorians, was a symbol of defiance, a testament to the fragile alliances that held it together. But with each passing day, the strain between these factions grew. Evelyn stood on the bridge, looking out at the distant stars, lost in thought. The unity of the Coalition was beginning to crack. The Xylers, once eager allies, now questioned the direction of the rebellion. Their need for control was in direct conflict with humanity's more chaotic approach to warfare. And the Shilvani, who had long fought for their own survival, were growing impatient with what they saw as human recklessness. In the war room, Seren Kale confronted her. "We need to take a stand. I've been pushing for a decisive strike, but the Xylars keep hesitating. We can't afford this indecision." Evelyn met Serene's gaze, her resolve firming. "I understand your frustration, Seren, but every decision we make now could determine the course of this war. We can't afford to fracture before the real fight begins. But if we don't act now, the Council will move faster than we can." Seren's voice was tight with frustration, a spark of hope. The days that followed were filled with tense negotiations, but even in the midst of conflict, there was a spark of hope. Captain Voss and his officers worked tirelessly to forge new alliances, contacting smaller rebel factions across the galaxy. They began to build a network of resistance that extended far beyond the reaches of the Vanguard's fleet. "Evelyn," Voss said one evening, his voice tinged with hope, "we've made contact with the Frasti. They're a nomadic species known for their stealth tactics. They've been operating under the Council's radar for decades. They want to join us, but they have conditions." Evelyn looked up from the star map she had been studying. "Conditions? They want us to prove our strength. They've fought alone for so long, they can't afford to put their trust in something that isn't certain." Evelyn nodded. "Then we show them what we're capable of." But it's not just about strength, it's about trust. Voss smiled. I'll get things started. Unlikely alliances. As the vanguard moved toward the Frasties' homeworld, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that the weight of the galaxy was on her shoulders. The alliance was fragile, and every choice she made could tip it one way or the other. As the ship approached the Frasties' hidden planet, Evelyn knew she had one chance to secure their allegiance, by showing them that the rebellion was about more than just humans fighting for survival. The Frastii, a species of tall, angular beings with shimmering, translucent skin, welcomed the humans with cautious curiosity. Their leader, Alaric, was a calculating strategist who had seen the galaxy's darkest sides. He stood before Evelyn, his piercing gaze never leaving her face. "You seek our help," Alaric said in his slow, deliberate voice, "but why should we trust you? You're a young species. Your leaders have already shown you're willing to defy the most powerful forces in the galaxy, yet you've failed to unite your own people." Evelyn stood tall, meeting his gaze unwaveringly. "We're building something different. We're building something strong. We've come to show you that together we can break the chains of the Council, but we need your help." Alaric tilted his head, studying her, as though weighing the future of the galaxy in a single moment. "Your offer is intriguing, but I need more than words. Prove to me that your unity is more than just a dream." The battle for unity. In the wake of Alaric's challenge, Evelyn knew the time had come to solidify their alliances through action. They needed a victory, something that would prove to the galaxy that the rebellion was capable of not just survival, but triumph. The Frasties' homeworld was the perfect battleground. Though small and largely uninhabited, it was strategically located near a Council supply route, a vital lifeline that kept their fleet moving. The rebellion's forces had an opportunity to strike a blow, disrupting the supply chain and sending a message to the Council. Evelyn made the call to launch an assault. The stakes were high, and failure would not only doom the rebellion, but fracture the already fragile unity between the species. As the ships descended into the atmosphere, tensions ran high. Evelyn could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The Frastii had joined them, but only under the condition that they would win. There was no room for failure. The battle was fierce. Rebel ships clashed with Council forces, a dazzling display of fire and light in the night sky. The Frasties' stealth ships struck from the shadows, delivering precise blows to the Council's fleet. For the first time, the rebellion seemed to have the upper hand. In the heat of the battle, Seren Kale led a team of rebels to disable the enemy's command center. The air was thick with tension, each move bringing them closer to victory or defeat. As they breached the command center, Seren shouted into the comms, "It's ours! We've done it!" Evelyn let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Their victory was a triumph, not just of strength, but of unity, something the Council had underestimated. The rebellion was no longer just a collection of rebel cells. It was a movement, a force that could stand against the might of the galaxy. A new beginning. With the Council's supply route cut off and their forces reeling, the galaxy had taken notice. The victory at Frastie was more than a military success. It was a testament to the power of unity. Despite their differences, the human-led coalition had proven that when the galaxy's oppressed came together, nothing was impossible. As Evelyn stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, gazing out at the stars, she felt something shift deep within her. They had taken their first step towards something much greater than a simple rebellion. They had taken the first step toward forging a new galaxy, one where power was no longer held in the hands of the few, but shared among all. The journey was far from over. There would be more battles, more betrayals, and more heartache. But as long as they stood united, Evelyn knew the galaxy had never seen anything like this before. What would you do if you had to unite people from different backgrounds and species, knowing that failure could mean your death? How would you earn their trust? Enjoying this chapter? Don't forget to like and subscribe to HFY Genesis for more thrilling tales of unity, courage, and humanity's fight for freedom. The Vanguard hummed softly in the depths of space, its crew busy with preparations for what would be their greatest and most dangerous mission yet. After months of skirmishes, betrayals, and uneasy alliances, humanity's rebellion had reached a critical juncture. The Galactic Council, for the first time in history, was truly vulnerable. The attacks on its supply chains and key military hubs had left it reeling, and the Council's response had been desperate. But they were still the Council, the most powerful political and military body in the galaxy. And now, it was clear that their retaliation would come in full force. Evelyn Cade, standing on the bridge of the Vanguard, felt the weight of the galaxy pressing on her shoulders. The victories they'd celebrated were fleeting. The true test was still ahead. The rebellion had become more than just a fight for freedom. It was now a war for survival. Every step forward would be met with violence, and every decision they made could tip the scales between victory and defeat. In the quiet moments before battle, Evelyn found herself alone, staring out into the infinite darkness. Her mind raced as she reviewed the intelligence reports. Council warships were massing on the outer rim, and the message was clear. They had learned the true cost of underestimating humanity. They had taken the bait. Now it was time for the rebellion to strike a decisive blow. But there was something Evelyn had not anticipated. Something insidious. The reports from the front lines were incomplete. One of their key informants, a mole within the Council's network, had suddenly gone silent. Worse, there were whispers that a faction of defectors from within the rebellion had begun to fracture the unity they had so painstakingly built. Her pulse quickened. Were they truly prepared for what was to come? The moment of decision. The feeling of unease gnawed at Evelyn as she met with her top commanders. Seren Kale, Captain Voss, and the rest of the leadership had gathered in the war room, an intense atmosphere hanging between them. "We can't waste this opportunity," Voss said, his usual sharp demeanor tempered by the mounting pressure. "We hit them now, while they're still reeling. We take their capital and make them feel the weight of our rebellion. We send a message they can't ignore." But Seren spoke up, her voice uncharacteristically low. "We don't know the full extent of their response. The Council has weapons at their disposal we haven't seen yet. They may be preparing something bigger than we've ever encountered." A quiet tension filled the room. Even with all their preparation, no one knew what the Council's next move would be. The risk was immense. Evelyn's voice broke through the silence. "Then, we take the fight to them." Her words rang with authority, but beneath the surface, she too felt the fear that had taken root in her heart. "We have no choice now. If we hesitate, we'll lose everything we've gained." As the rebellion geared up for its boldest strike yet, a new threat emerged from within their ranks. The Xylars. Their previous defection from the Council had been a boon to the rebellion, but now, as they prepared for the final offensive, the Xylars began to show signs of shifting loyalty once more. They had always been cautious, calculating their every move. Their leader, Alaric, had been a hard ally to trust, and now whispers of their backdoor communications with Council agents began to spread like wildfire. In a private meeting, Evelyn confronted Alaric, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What's going on, Alaric? Are you still with us, or are you plotting your next move with the Council?" Alaric met her gaze with cold, measured calm, but there was something behind his eyes, something Evelyn hadn't seen before. A flicker of doubt, or perhaps fear. "We've always been about survival, Evelyn. The galaxy is full of factions with their own agendas. You may think you're the one leading this revolution, but the truth is, no one can guarantee that humanity will be able to defeat the Council." Evelyn's heart sank. She knew the Xylars were motivated by self-preservation, but hearing it spoken aloud made it all the more real. "Are you telling me you're willing to sell us out? After everything we've fought for?" Alaric took a slow breath. I'm telling you that the Council has the power to wipe us all out with a single push, and I'm not sure you're ready for what's coming. Evelyn's anger flared, but she fought to stay calm. The only way we'll lose is if we don't stand united. If you're not with us, Alaric, then you're against us. He stared at her, his lips pressed tight. You're asking for a war. I'm not sure you fully understand what that means for all of us. The next few hours unfolded in a whirlwind of shock and betrayal. Despite Evelyn's demands, the Xylers began pulling back, refusing to engage in the final assault on the Council's capital. It became clear that the fracture in their unity was not just a crack, it was a rift. Some Xylers were negotiating with Council forces in secret, preparing for a future where they would be part of the Council's new order, not an enemy. The news spread through the ranks like wildfire, causing an eruption of anger and fear. Those who had once trusted the Xylers now faced a grim reality. Could they truly defeat the Council without them? Would other factions begin to second-guess their allegiance? The point of no return. In the midst of the growing chaos, Evelyn stood alone on the bridge of the Vanguard, staring out at the stars. The rebellion, once filled with hope and unity, now seemed on the brink of collapse. The Xylers' betrayal stung, but Evelyn had no time for self-pity. The turning point had come. They could not allow this fissure to define them. We move forward, Evelyn said quietly, to no one in particular, her words determined. No more hesitation, no more second-guessing. We fight, no matter the cost. Captain Voss appeared beside her, offering a solemn nod. We'll follow you, Evelyn. We always have. Evelyn glanced back at him, her eyes hardened with resolve. Then it's time to finish what we started. We will hit the heart of the Council and show them that they underestimated humanity's power. The final decision. The decision had been made. Despite the odds, despite the fractures within the coalition, the rebellion would strike at the Council's capital. There could be no turning back. The fate of the galaxy, the future of humanity, all rested on this one mission. As the Vanguard and its fleet prepared for the final assault, Evelyn felt the weight of the galaxy pressing down on her. This was the turning point. The rebellion's survival, its future, was now in her hands. The galaxy's fate now hinged on a single reckless plan. The rebellion, a fragile coalition of human defiance and fractured alliances, had reached its tipping point. As the Vanguard and its fleet of rebel ships plunged deeper into Council space, Evelyn Cade could feel the pulse of destiny thrumming in her chest. There was no turning back. The rebel forces had assembled for the final assault, a strike aimed directly at the heart of the Galactic Council's capital, a city-sized station known as Varigal Prime. Located at the core of Council power, it was a symbol of their dominion over the galaxy. The Vanguard's mission was clear: breach the Citadel, disable the Council's command center, and broadcast humanity's defiant message to the galaxy. Victory would send shockwaves across the stars, proving that no empire, however ancient, could suppress the will of the people. But the Council was ready. They had anticipated this move, and their defenses were stronger than ever. The battle begins. As the fleet approached Varigal Prime, a blanket of darkness enveloped them, the station's defenses flaring to life. The Vanguard shuddered as blasts from enemy turrets rained down on the fleet, sending ripples of panic through the crew. The screens blinked with urgent warnings, and alarms blared. "Shields holding at 60%, shouted Lieutenant Harris, glancing nervously at the control panels. "But we can't take another hit like that." Evelyn's knuckles whitened as she gripped the edge of the console, her mind racing. "Keep pushing forward. We don't stop now. We break through, or we die trying." The rebel ships moved in unison, swarming like bees around a nest, dodging fire as they closed the distance. On the ground, Saren Kael and her team of elite rebels were ready to infiltrate the Citadel's inner sanctum, but they had to make it through the Council's impenetrable security first. "Eyes sharp," Saren muttered, her hand tightening around the trigger of her blaster. "This isn't a battle. It's a massacre waiting to happen. Evelyn's voice crackled through the comms. You've got one shot at this, Seren. Take it. The breakthrough. The Vanguard led the charge, its cannons pounding relentlessly against the Citadel's outer shields. The tension was unbearable as they neared the station's main docking bay. Evelyn watched through the viewport as the ships darted and weaved, laser fire dancing like shooting stars. She knew they were pushing their luck. Every moment they stayed in this engagement increased the risk of their destruction. All ships, fire at will. Keep them distracted. Voss's voice rang out over the comms. The rebel fleet unleashed a devastating barrage, momentarily overwhelming the Council's defenses. The explosions rocked the station's hull, leaving cracks in the mighty Citadel's armor. Then, in a moment of sheer luck, one of the larger rebel warships pierced through the defenses and collided with the station's outer wall. The explosion created an opening, a breach big enough for the Vanguard to slip through. It was a split-second decision, a gamble that could either seal their fate or provide the opportunity they desperately needed. Now! Evelyn shouted. The order was clear. The Vanguard darted into the gap, its hull shuddering as it entered the station's inner atmosphere. The fleet followed suit, now committed to the assault. The heart of the Council. Inside the station's core, the Council's leaders stood ready in the central command center, watching as the human-led rebellion moved toward their doorstep. They were prepared, as they always had been, for this moment. The Council had built its power on control, and it wasn't about to lose it to a ragtag group of rebels. You knew they would come, said Councillor Dreven, his voice cool as ever, his silver eyes narrowing at the approaching threat. They are not prepared for the power we hold, replied High Arbiter Zavros, his towering form illuminated by the harsh lights of the command room. Let them come. We will crush them as we have crushed all others. Draven hesitated, his brow furrowing. What if they've grown stronger than we anticipate? Zavros's lip curled in a derisive smile. Then we'll remind them who rules the galaxy. But even as he spoke, the first signs of chaos began to ripple through the system. Rebel forces had broken through the outer gates. The core was no longer secure, and for the first time in millennia, the Council found itself scrambling. The final assault. As the rebel forces made their final push toward the central command center, the air was thick with tension. Evelyn's voice echoed over the comms, her command unwavering. We're almost there. Disable the command center, take control, make sure they can never threaten us again. Inside the Citadel, Seren Kyle and her team breached the command center's door, their weapons at the ready. The guards inside were formidable, but the element of surprise worked in their favor. In seconds, the room was filled with the sound of blasters and the flashes of light as rebels took down the Council's elite defenders. At the heart of the room stood the Council's most prized possession, an ancient relic that powered the entire system. It was the core of their power, the engine of their rule. Without it, their entire network would fall apart, and now it was in the hands of the rebels. "Don't shoot it unless you have to!" Seren shouted, her voice strained. "We need this for leverage, not destruction." Evelyn's voice rang out from the Vanguard. "Disrupt the core! Shut it down now!" With a final blow, the energy grid was disabled, sending a shockwave through the station. The lights flickered. The air vibrated with the sound of a failing system. The High Arbiter, watching from a distant terminal, realized too late that his empire was crumbling. Victory or death. The final moments were a blur of explosions and chaos. The rebels had broken through the heart of the Council's capital, and as the station began to fall into disarray, Zavros himself made one last desperate attempt to call for reinforcements. "Send the fleet. All ships. Hold them off." But it was too late. The Vanguard and its fleet had already turned the tide, and as the Citadel's shields collapsed, the Council's forces fled, leaving behind their once proud empire in the hands of those they had sought to control. Evelyn stood at the helm of the Vanguard, her breath slow and measured, as the stars outside the viewport flickered with the light of their victory. The rebellion had succeeded, but at a cost. The galaxy would never be the same. The stars outside the Vanguard's viewport were calm, their distant glow somehow indifferent to the chaos that had unfolded in the galaxy. What was once an empire, a looming force of galactic control, was now fractured. The once feared Galactic Council had been forced into retreat. They had lost not only their capital but their grip on the galaxy. And humanity. Humanity had taken the first step towards securing a place among the stars. But in the quiet aftermath, Evelyn Cade found herself at the center of an overwhelming, uneasy silence. The victory was hard won, but it felt different. Victory wasn't the same when it was uncertain. What came after it? What would be left of the galaxy after the dust settled? The price of freedom. The first days after the battle were spent in quiet reflection. The rebellion had won, but at what cost? The Vanguard's crew, though triumphant, were bruised and battered, physically and emotionally. The casualties were far higher than anyone had anticipated. Allies were lost. Some defectors, like the Xylars, had been swept back into the fold of the Council, their once promised loyalty a distant memory. And then, there were the humans. They had walked away from peace talks. They had defied the greatest force the galaxy had ever known. But now, they stood as the new face of power, and the responsibility weighed heavily on every individual who had fought for their freedom. Evelyn stood at the observation deck, staring out into the vast expanse of space. Her mind replayed the choices that had led them here, the conversations, the risks, the gambles they had taken. Could they truly build something new from the ashes of the old? Or was it all just another way for the powerful to rise again? Behind her, Captain Voss approached, his footsteps heavy but certain. "We did it," he said quietly, though there was no triumph in his voice. "We've crushed the Council. But the galaxy is broken." Evelyn nodded slowly. "The war is over, but the peace, that's where we'll face the real challenge." Voss's voice softened. "You've led us this far, Evelyn. You can lead us further." The unknown future. The leadership of the rebellion had now turned into the leadership of a new era. But even as they celebrated, there was a creeping feeling of doubt. The newly formed council of rebel leaders, human, Shilvani, Andorian, and others, met to discuss the aftermath of the war, but there was no clear path forward. Seren Kale, one of the rebellion's most hardened leaders, spoke first. "We can't keep relying on war to solve our problems. The galaxy is too vast. There are too many factions, too many species, all with their own agendas." Evelyn could feel the weight of the room's gaze on her. She was no longer just a diplomat or a commander. She was the symbol of humanity's defiance and the fragile hope for a new galaxy. But what could that new galaxy look like? One where peace was possible, or one where power would once again be hoarded by a few at the top? "We need a new order," Evelyn said, her voice steady but laced with a weariness that came from too many sleepless nights. "We can't let what happened with the Council happen again. We've fought for freedom. Now we have to make sure that freedom isn't something that only exists for the strongest." Voss spoke next. "A new government, a council, not like the one we just destroyed. One that's founded on unity, not domination." The rebel factions murmured in agreement, but there was still something uneasy in the room. Could such unity hold? Could they trust each other after everything that had happened? A moment of doubt. Later that night, Evelyn found herself alone again, staring at the stars. The Vanguard was anchored in a nearby system, temporarily resting after the chaos of the battle. But she couldn't rest. The vision of the new galaxy they'd promised to build felt distant, too large to wrap her mind around. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. She turned to see Seren Kale standing in the doorway, her face filled with concern. "I wanted to speak with you," Seren said, stepping inside. "About the future, about the decisions we'll have to make." Evelyn gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit down. What's on your mind?" Seren took a seat. You know as well as I do that peace is fragile. I've seen too many alliances crumble, too many false hopes built on lies. Do you really believe we can keep this coalition together, Evelyn? Evelyn's gaze turned inward. I have to believe it. We have to believe it. What else do we have? Serene's eyes softened. Maybe we don't have to have all the answers right now, but we need to be prepared for what comes next, not just for the galaxy, but for ourselves. Evelyn nodded. She knew Seren was right. They couldn't afford to lose sight of what they'd truly fought for. Freedom, yes, but also the ability to create something better. And they couldn't do that by standing still, waiting for the galaxy to heal itself. The rebuilding begins. The days turned into weeks, and the first steps toward rebuilding the galaxy began. The Council's vast network of planets was in disarray, but the rebellion's forces had managed to hold key systems together, ensuring that there was no power vacuum left for a new empire to rise. Humanity, once a mere pawn in a much larger game, now found itself at the forefront of a galactic reorganization. Systems once ruled with iron fists began to turn toward more democratic, cooperative forms of governance. The Vanguard, now transformed from a warship to a symbol of peace, carried out diplomatic missions to newly liberated worlds, forging alliances and extending invitations to join the new galactic order. Do you ever wonder if we're doing the right thing? Voss's voice cut through her thoughts, and she turned to find him standing beside her. All the time, Evelyn admitted. But the choice was never really ours. We did what we had to do. And now? Now we make sure we don't become what we fought against. Evelyn's voice was quiet but resolute. We'll show them that there's more than one way to be strong. We'll make this galaxy something worth living for. Enjoying this story? Don't forget to like and subscribe to HFY Genesis for more thrilling tales of defiance, unity, and humanity's fight for freedom.